What the Heck is Happening in HR is happy to welcome Linda Burhans. Linda is the gal who cares for the caregivers with love, laughter, and lessons learned. Author, speaker, radio show host Linda Burhams is ever awed by the strength, resilience, and commitment of the caregivers she meets and seeks to remind them that they're not alone. Help is available, and it's okay to accept that help. Caregivers that seek to take on everything on their own often decline in health. The most important thing she teaches is that caregivers need and deserve the time and space to take care of themselves. Whether you read her books or meet Linda in person, you will quickly realize that she truly lives by her mission to acknowledge and appreciate all caregivers as they care for those who cannot care for themselves. You can join her on Fridays at 1 p.m. Eastern on WTAN 106.1 FM or 1340 AM in the Tampa Bay area. You can tune in live on YouTube at Connecting Caregivers Radio or live on Facebook at Linda Burhams. Podcasts of every show and other resources can be found at lindaburhams.com. Linda, I'm so glad you're here today to chat with us. And I am wanting to make sure people understand that you have that amazing conference each year as well. In fact, I think it's twice a year, and I want to be sure that people sign up for it. I have learned so much from it. Thanks for being here today. For our podcast disclaimer, please visit the episode description. Thanks so much for coming back to What the Heck is Happening in HR. And today we have Linda Burhams who's speaking with us about caregivers. Welcome, Linda.
Thank you so much for having me today. I'm glad to be here.
Yeah. And you have a podcast, you have you're on YouTube, you have a radio show, you have an amazing conference called Connecting Caregivers Conference, and I have learned so much. I mean, I still tell people from that conference about technology and like,
Yeah.
why don't I get like a bathroom seat that would light up when I walk into the room and it's
Yeah.
motion? I mean, I remember these things and they make a point. But you have really touched my life, and I've never shared this story with you, but I became a caregiver quickly, with my mom needed it. And so I didn't know what to do. I didn't know where to
Right.
go. I didn't know what I was doing right. I didn't know what I was doing wrong. And you showed up in my feed somewhere, somehow.
Wow.
And I was like, there's my angel. So I didn't do it the right way. So let me help people through you. If someone becomes a caregiver right away and it just suddenly they are the caregiver, what do they do? What are the first steps?
The first thing you need to know is you need to get an education.
Okay.
And you need to get an education. The first thing you need to know is to find out exactly what the diagnosis is.
And caregivers in our aspect are taking care of other adults generally. Is that
Yes.
okay?
Yes. So if you went to the doctor and the doctor said you have cancer, you would ask, what kind of cancer? What stage is it? How do we treat it? Blah, 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 blah.
Mm-hmm.
If you go to the doctor now today, this is what a lot of them say. Oh, your loved one has dementia or mild cognitive impairment. Here's a prescription. Come back in 4 months. Well, everyone is treated different. Everything is different. So you need to get an education, because without that education, it's like just knocking your head up against the wall.
So where did they go to get that education from?
Exactly.
Where? How do we even know what questions to ask?
The first thing I suggest is that they get into a support group.
Okay.
So there are support groups, live support groups. There are support groups online. I do a live support group every month. I do a virtual support group every month. I do a virtual journaling workshop for caregivers every month.
Okay.
And just recently in the journaling workshop, I asked them, the question was, what has this group meant to you?
Mm-hmm.
And they all said, we made friends that understood us.
Oh. Wow.
Because if you're not in the same boat as someone else, you don't have any idea what they're going through.
Yeah.
And if you can get a little bit of education from other people that have been through it already, it can save you so much time, energy, and just stress.
Yeah.
You know, recently I was in my mail room and there was two ladies in there I didn't know, and the one lady opened her box and it was so stuffed, all the mail fell out on the floor,
Oh.
and she started crying, and I thought, well, it's only mail. And she said, my husband has dementia. I can't even get out of the house to pick up my mail.
Oh.
And the other woman said, my husband has dementia too. And I said, you know what? You girls need to be friends with me and you need to be friends with each other.
Wow.
And now I see them at night walking around the complex together with their husband.
Oh, that brings me joy.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow.
So
Wow.
if we could have that community is so important because it takes a village.
Yeah, it is a lonely thing, caregiving.
Well, the biggest thing I find with caregivers is something that I call the AAA dilemma. Caregivers don't ask for help, they don't accept help, and they don't acknowledge themselves.
Mm.
Because what happens is every time you ask the caregiver, how are you doing? The response is always, I'm okay.
Fine.
Yeah, or I'm hanging in there.
Mm.
Well, none of that is okay. But if you keep saying that to people, then after a while they stop asking you because they feel like they're in your space. And then the caregiver is home at night crying, I have to do this all by myself. Well, you said no to everybody that wanted to help you.
Yeah.
So I suggest to caregivers when they have some time to just sit down and write a list of some things you can accept help with. You're not the only one that can mow a lawn. I'm not asking you to have somebody bathe your mother,
Mm-hmm.
but there's so many other things that you're responsible for as a 24/7 caregiver.
Yeah.
And every time they do it, their friends are so happy that they gave them some direction on what to do,
Mm-hmm.
and they get some relief.
Yeah.
One gal just puts the list on her bathroom mirror, her guest bathroom.
Oh, that's great. I love
Talk
that.
about being subtle.
Yeah. Stay out of the cupboard, but here, read this.
Yeah.
um, wow. But maybe we don't want to share the story. Somebody says, how are you? And you don't want to break down.
No, you don't want to break down, but you don't want to be dishonest.
No.
You might just say, thanks so much for asking. I don't know what the heck I'm doing right now.
Is it a
Just be
bit of
honest.
imposter syndrome only for kind
Well,
of a
because we all want to
personal
be
one?
the perfect caregiver. And we all always think that I'm the bomb caregiver. I can do it better than anybody else. It's my responsibility.
Yeah.
Well, that's not true, number one. And number two, I think when you have that attitude, many times the person you're caring for
Hmm.
is saying underneath their breath, could you go away for a little while and have somebody else come see me?
Yeah. Yeah.
When I was telling you about that list, one of my caregivers, she was very distressed because she couldn't go to church anymore because of her husband's erratic behavior.
Hmm.
And she said, Linda, I've given up everything. And she said, my neighbor's Jewish and I always hear you preaching. She said, so I went over and I asked him, do you think you could watch my husband on Sunday when I go to church? And he said, I would be glad to do that. So she said the first Sunday she ran to church and she ran back home and they were playing dominoes. They told her, go away, we don't need you. So now
Wow.
they give her 3 hours every Sunday morning. Well,
Wow.
not just for her, the neighbor gets to see his friend.
Right.
And
Right.
her spouse gets to see his friend.
Right. See someone different than you. Yeah. Wow.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow. So really kind of take a breath, educate yourself, make a
Mm-hmm.
list of how to ask for help. So the first one was go through your 3 A's again to remember these.
The AAA dilemma.
Right.
Number one, they don't accept help,
Okay.
they don't ask for help,
Right.
and they don't acknowledge themselves.
Right. Talk about the acknowledge themselves for a second.
Well, it's very funny when I first started doing this 15 years ago, whatever it was, I had to educate caregivers that they were caregivers before I could help them.
Oh.
Because I'm not a caregiver, I'm the faithful spouse, I'm the good daughter,
Uh,
I'm the sister. No, if you're doing this and this and this and this and this, you're a caregiver.
mm-hmm.
Because a lot of our caregiving creeps up on us.
Right.
Many times we're a caregiver because there's a stroke, an accident or something, but so many other times with cancer or dementia or Parkinson's, it's a long road.
Right.
It's a long road.
And it's an
But
up and down road.
yeah, yeah. Well, one of the seminars I do is the dementia dance
What is that?
because sometimes it's a tango and sometimes it's a jitterbug and once in a while it's a waltz. But you have to know when to lead and when to follow.
Yeah.
And that's all the things that you learn in support groups and in seminars.
So, but
If you
support groups can be scary, Linda. I mean, they're so bad over there. I mean, my loved one's not like that. I mean, I don't want to see my loved one. I'm not going to want to deal with it. I mean, how do I get through that to get to a
Well,
support
first you
group?
have to find the right kind of support groups. Like there's a lot of Facebook groups that are out there for caregivers. I don't approve of a lot of them because it's just a lot of people ranting and raving,
Uh huh.
whining. Um, but if you go to my website, lindaburhans.com, under events, my support groups are there and other people, because I'm not the only girl on the block. You find who fits for you. If you come on a Zoom support group, you don't even have to show your picture or talk if you don't want to for the first group. Could just listen
Mm-hmm.
and see if that's a fit for you.
Yeah.
And they're all different. Like my group, we always end up laughing. Some are a little more serious. Some are,
Mm-hmm.
just certain topics. But it
Mm-hmm.
is one of the interesting things about my groups has been too is many times caregivers are in my support group for a long time and then their loved one passes. And so they come back.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the caregiver support group, not a grief support group.
Mm-hmm.
So what I've done is I've started a mentor program. So if in the support group, if your husband died of Parkinson's and a new person comes in and their husband has Parkinson's, she can mentor her. They can
Mm-hmm.
talk in between support groups. She's going to give her tips quicker than no one else is going to give her because I'm not an expert on Parkinson's.
Mm-hmm.
And what it does for the caregiver whose loved one has passed away, it gives them a new sense of purpose.
Yeah.
Because I've been a caregiver for 24/7, for maybe years.
Yeah.
Now, what about me?
Right. What do I do now? Right.
Yeah. What do I do now?
Wow, I love those, your 3 A's. It's so tough.
And just know that your caregiving experience can be the most horrific experience of your life, or it can be close to beautiful, depending on how you handle it. And I think people it depends on how you look at it. I look at caregiving as a privilege. It
Mhm,
was a privilege to take care of my mother. It
mhm,
was a privilege the last 18 months of her life that I got to be with her every day. It was a privilege that I got to really, really tell her how I felt about her. I
mhm.
remember one day my mom was at my house and she was sitting in my den and she was staring at her hands. And I was like, Mama, what? And she goes, I'm just looking at these old, ugly, arthritic hands. And they were pretty beat up. Now, normally I would have said, oh, Mama, those hands are just fine. Or here's some hand cream.
Mhm.
But I know my mother doesn't have a long time to live. And I sat down and I took my mother's hands in mine. I was like, Mama, besides how many dishes these hands washed
Mm,
and how many clothes, these hands combed my hair,
mhm,
wiped my tears, and gave me a little whack on the fanny when I deserved it, Mama. I said, these are the best hands in the world.
mm.
And my mother just softly said to me, thank you, Linda. And that was one of the most profound moments in my life. And what did it take me? 60 seconds?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
So a lot of it is how you look at it
Right, perspective is so important in so
with
many parts of
everything.
life. Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah.
I have learned so much from you, and we have more to learn from you because you're going to stay and do another segment with us about what can happen in the workplace and how employers can help caregivers, but also coworkers, what coworkers
Yeah.
can say. Because I have found that sometimes friends just don't even ask anymore. I'm not very
Right.
good about asking for help, but they're also
Right.
tired of asking because I don't go.
Right.
I'm in lockdown after 6 o'clock at night. So,
Yeah.
so they quit asking. And then do I become resentful? But how do I do that as a coworker? How do I support the coworker? But one of the things I want to be sure in this segment that we get in, and we'll get in on the next segment, are your conferences. Your conferences are just amazing, and
Well,
recordings are
I'll tell you,
available. So tell me about the next one coming up.
those conferences were a gift of COVID.
Yeah. Wow.
So this will be my seventh conference. I do it every May and every November. It is totally free for caregivers. We have 15 to 18 speakers, totally virtual. You don't have to leave your house. You don't have to find somebody to take care of your loved one. Now, I don't expect anybody to sit there for 3 solid days and watch it because I'm running it and I can barely do it. It's true. But anyone who registers for the conference within 30 days receives all the videos of the conference
Yeah.
to watch whenever they want, to share with whoever they want. That's when the YouTube channel goes crazy.
Yeah.
because it's good content and
It
people need
is.
to see it. And the story I hear all the time between my radio shows or the conference or whatever was, oh, Linda, that was so good, that topic, until mom had to go to the bathroom. But now, thanks to technology, you can come back and listen to it whenever you want.
And I can tell you, I do. So, Linda, thanks so much for sharing these things we should do when, yes, suddenly we become a caregiver and we didn't even know that was our next job. So,
Yeah.
thanks so much for sharing those tips. And we look forward to the next segment where we'll talk about the workplace and caregiving.